Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast. A late Friday night recording after Purdue Fan Day in Ross-Ade Stadium, and obviously three practices will in the books. The fourth will be tomorrow, Saturday, if I'm counting correctly.
Where are these
and
books
of course,
people speak of?
What's that?
Where are these books people speak of? Is there some leather-bound volume kept somewhere where everything that happens is logged diligently?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
We just haven't given you the password, Brian.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to go back and start to say I want to thank our sponsor, and that's the Purdue Union Club Hotel. Tom Dienhart is counting the days to our Wednesday night live. That'll be in the month of August 31st, at the Boiler Up Bar. We'll be ready to be counting down the hours for Purdue Penn State. There is the Union Club Hotel folks have been pleased to have them back on as a sponsor for this year. Also, if you like Gold and Black on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to us, and also you can comment as well. Anything else that you want to us to bring to the table, we appreciate all your support from there. So, all right, I want to start with you, Tom, and look at obviously you've categorized and outlined what you've talked to or what you've seen in the first couple practices. You've seen full practices, but just an overriding thoughts here in the first week of camp and what has transpired on the football field for Jeff Brom's sixth Boilermaker team.
Brian has to make sure he pays attention and stops sorting his Kurt Bavacqua.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm following baseball scores right now. Sorry.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you're right, Alan. 3 practices in the books. Friday night was the fan day in Ross-Ade Stadium. I don't know. Ryan was there. Maybe 500 people, Brian? 1,000?
Yeah, probably.
So let's call it a smattering. How about that? And
a loose smattering, if you will.
A loose smattering sprinkled throughout the fabled horseshoe that sits along Northwestern Avenue. I guess so far so good. If I were to have to, I guess, encapsulate the first 3 practices. No major injuries have occurred. That's always a good thing, right? There are still the case of the 3 cornerbacks who remain out: Jamari Brown, Corey Trice, T. Denson. Jeff Brom sounds optimistic, especially about Brown and Trice, who are doing more than T. Denson at this point. Hopes to get them back to at least get a couple weeks of practice in before that opener on September 1st. Sanusi Kane the same way, trying to target him maybe for the first game. Mo Amadade was on the practice field for the first time Friday night after missing the first 2 practices. And just some younger guys are out. Some may be out for the year. Curtis Dovilla, receiver from Louisiana. Jordan Buchanan, a cornerback from Georgia, could be out for the year with injuries. And Andre Oben had a shoulder surgery in March. He's going to be out for a while. Drew Bibber, redshirt freshman, tight ends in a boot. No surgery. Should be back in a couple of weeks. So by and large, guys, they're a pretty healthy team. The offense had a little edge on Friday, I think, just because that secondary is pretty banged up. And Purdue offense is pretty good, right? And speaking of the Purdue offense and injured players, Brock Thompson, he's another guy sort of being held back. He wasn't even dressed out tonight. I just want to get him to game day at this point. So, again, a work in progress, but a healthy team and a team that's still, according to Jeff Brom, obviously has still a lot to work on here moving forward.
Ryan, you were out there today and watched this also. I mean, obviously you've been through a lot of fall camps in the past. Aiden O'Connell is who he is. He's a married man now, and Tom's chronicled that, and a guy that is obviously the linchpin of this football team. But just some impressions of even reading Tom's stuff and being out there tonight, and guys you've talked to. What are your thoughts as you get through this first week of fall camp?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I just kind of go out and I'm just out there to BS with people and kind of be seen in case anybody wants to yell at me. I don't want anybody to ever say, hey, this guy writes about football, but he never shows up and, whatever. So I don't know what I have for you there. I saw a couple of big plays be made there at the end. Charlie Jones made a big play. It's going to be interesting to see. is Aiden O'Connell the sort of quarterback this year who can, take this group of relatively unproven receivers and make them something more than they are? I think that kind of has to be the hope. They need some of these younger guys to kind of come along, some of these newer guys, some of these guys who are, coming back from injuries. I'm personally curious to know that if Tom had a sleeper at wide receiver, who that player might be.
Tom, who would
Brian,
that be?
I think Brian assessed the receiving core. There's no David Bell or a Milton Wright. We all know that, but Jeff Brom said maybe there could be some guys that step up. We know the familiar names, right? Brock Thompson, T.J. Sheffield, Mershawn Rice, Abdul Rahman Yassin, Charlie Jones, Tyrone Tracy. Sophomore Andrew Sowinski. How about that?
Okay.
Number 26. He was back there taking punts with Charlie Jones. He's a pretty athletic guy. He's just a walk-on. But I remember last year, Aiden O'Connell even talking about Andrew Sowinski a little bit. Works a lot with him, and he's the kind of guy that maybe could emerge as maybe a spot receiver who can help in the return game and also maybe provide just another layer of potential and pass catching ability to receiving core that, again, has a lot of interesting options, but may not have a lot of star power. Again, real quick on these receivers, two other guys I didn't mention, but Jeff Brom talked about them Friday after practice. Colin Sullivan and Elijah Canyon, both redshirt sophomores. Canyon's a transfer from Auburn, pretty banged up in the spring, so they didn't see a lot of him. He's the biggest receiver they've got, 6'4", 220, almost a de facto tight end, sort of like Malik Carr. And he's really at a nice camp along with Sullivan. Canyon, as Jeff Brom says, not going to get a lot of separation on guys, but he's good at making that contested catch. He has what Brom called a big pass catching radius, the kind of guy they can use, he said, in the red zone, on slants, and on quick outs. Again, a physical guy can body up D-backs, fight for the ball, and just be the bigger guy and go up and get that contested pass. So, again, Elijah Canyon could be a real sleeper. Colin Sullivan, too, right? I know we've been waiting on Colin Sullivan, the kid from Round Rock, Texas. We saw a little bit of him in the bowl game, if you remember.
Yep.
Because they really had some depth issues. I think he may have even had a catch or two.
Yeah,
he could have maybe a little bit of be a bit of an X factor too. This receiving core is going to be really fun to watch sort out.
What Tom, I want to go circle back on a question of and Brian also, if you saw him today, but what you mentioned a little bit about Nick Carraway and just freshmen and newcomers, maybe true freshmen that stand out to you. You've talked a lot about the newcomers, but anybody else outside of Carraway and I know we talked about Joe Strickland and Brady Allen because they were in camp in the spring, but or anybody else that jumps out at you just from a beauty contest standpoint, guys that really look the part, at least at this point.
Yeah, you talked about Carraway. He did not get here till the summer, but Coach Brom was asked about him tonight, and he thinks he's a heck of a prospect. And if you listen to Mark Hagan, just since he's got on campus, he's a guy that has a chance, I think, to get on the field in pass rushing situations at the very minimum, maybe at that Leo spot. He's quite a specimen physically. If you get up next to him and look at him, watch him go through the individual drills, he is pretty impressive. And the problem there with that D line, guys, is it's so deep. There's a lot of veterans there, but Carraway may have a skill set that allows him to maybe forge some type of a role this year. And then Mo Monade, right? The kid from West Lafayette High School, who they like a lot, and 6 foot 285, and his lower body looks like it's fully developed, guys. He's a full-grown man, and I think he's going to play this year too. How much, I'm not sure, but those are a couple of true freshmen. Zion Steptoe, receiver from Frisco, Texas. Again, we talked about how many receivers they've got. I think he's good, but I think it's going to be hard for him to get on the field. J.P. Dieter, another guy who got her early, Joe Strickland. They may have shots too, but again, those are two defensive linemen. They've got a lot of veterans to climb over, guys. Not to belabor this D-line and how deep it is, but one guy it seems like maybe nobody really talks about that's a newcomer is the Cole Brevard kid. Penn State nose tackle, number 91. This would be his third year in college, and he's got a fully developed body. If you watch him, you can tell he's been coached, and he's a guy that could really maybe be a nice addition to that line on the interior, especially right on that nose. 6'3", about 315. And I think he's motivated to show he's pretty good after 2 largely unfulfilling years at Penn State.
Yeah, interesting. And then that, and obviously Purdue's Jeff Brom talked about after practice on Friday, the need to get that secondary healthy, get everybody to the field as much as possible. All right, Brian, while you were snooping around talking to people, which you're good at doing, and now you're not a snooper, but guy that you are able to communicate with folks, any other things that you heard, talked about, or whether it be any other topics that we're going to get into another topic, actually, was probably the story of the week, but any other insight from today's practice, Friday's practice, I should say, that wet your whistle from a topical standpoint?
I want to say one other thing about receivers. I think it would be a really positive thing if that Elijah Canyon becomes a player, because when you look at when Purdue's offenses have been good, they've had that big, rangy receiver on the outside that can pull defenses, east and west to the sidelines and open up the middle a little bit. Anthony Mahangu, after he turned into Calvin Johnson there at the back half of that year, Milton Wright did that a little bit for him. David Bell, obviously not because he was huge, but because he was kind of a matrix type of guy. I think that would be really important if an Elijah Canyon or a Mershawn Rice or one of those taller, rangier sorts of guys can kind of become that downfield sort of guy, just for the overall offensive operation. Being in the stadium today reminds of the looming stadium project, and I guess from what I understand, the revealing of the plans is going to wait a couple more weeks. It's going to have to wait a couple more weeks. Some things are being ironed out. I think it's going to be closer to the season before Purdue publicizes any of that. So just being in the stadium kind of reminded me of that. A couple people told me that today, and you asked me for a random topic. So there's
a good one.
There's a random topic for you.
All right, that qualifies. I think that is a storyline that obviously Purdue fans are very eager to hear what happens. All right, Tom, one more football question I want to throw at you. Just the quarterbacks outside of number 16. You've written, pretty completely about what you've seen so far, but anything else, that jumps out at you? Again, you're watching him early on in practice, so it's early. I get that. But Brady Allen, Michael Alamo, Austin Burton, just comments on anything that you've seen from those three so far.
Nice room, right, guys? There's some talent there. You got some veteran talent right at the top. 2 6-year players in O'Connell and Burton. I do think Burton's going to be the number 2 guy if something should happen to Aiden O'Connell. I think Michael Alamo, this will be his 3rd year in the program, if you can believe it. And he may be the best athlete. Can run the ball, got a strong arm, and obviously he has more familiarity with this offense. And then Brady Allen, guys, boy, what a good kid. He seems like just a great person, a great young man, and he's big. He's a big dude, man. I mean, he's every bit of 6'6". He looks like an NFL quarterback already. It'll be interesting to see as he continues to mature and lift weights and eat right, how big he can get. Like I said, he looks like one of those Drew Bledsoe guys. Like I said, a legit 6'6", and it's going to be fun to watch him develop. See if he can get some game action this year, right? I'm sure they'd love to dip his toes because he could be a real big factor for the job next year. And then real quick, Alan, not just straying off quarterbacks, I want to mention Kobe Lewis.
Yes, you mentioned it. Go ahead.
Central Michigan, he's a guy worth watching, I think. He's not Eric Dickerson or Earl Campbell or Walter Payton, but I think this guy's a little bit of cut above what Purdue's got on its roster. Plus, he's a veteran, too. He's hungry, right? Don't ever underestimate that intangible. He didn't play last year at all. He had a knee injury. And this is a chance for this kid to show that he can be a Big Ten football player. And I think he's a fifth-year senior, I believe, too. So this could be his last go-around. Jeff Brom said he's getting up to speed here, quickly. We'll get better as practice goes on. But he's a guy that, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't be shocked if at some point sooner rather than later that maybe he's the guy that's that first-team running back.
Yeah. And certainly in a position that Purdue is going to need to have as much as it
All
can
right,
get.
man,
Yeah,
the key for me, guys, is how many times I call him Kobe Bryant this year.
Oh, I know.
Already happened once.
You know, we have a whole generation of Kobe's coming up now through the ranks.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That's a guarantee.
It's harder and harder. I've already gotten through the Shaq era where there were a number of Shaqs coming up through the pipeline. Now we're gonna have a lot of Kobe's, and in 15 years we're gonna have all the LeBrons we can handle.
Yeah.
Never underestimate angry little people at running back. We've learned that over the
I was going to say,
time.
I thought a Barry Sanders reference would have been good.
Well, he didn't rule out Barry Sanders, so I'm going to take that to mean.
I'm just talking size wise, nothing more, right?
He's not a big guy. This guy's not a midget. He's about 5'11", 5'10".
Is he? Okay.
He's not a sawed off little like DJ Knox or anything. He can catch the ball too. He likes to throw the ball to its back. So just another guy they can get that ball to on the edge if they want to throw it. Tyrone Tracy, these tight ends. I think the line, I tell you, I look at that line too, guys. Eric Miller, Spencer Holstead, Gus Hartwig. Then you got Marcus Bowe and you got Cam Craig. I think it's a pretty solid front five right there.
Yeah. Be a key part of what obviously any football team, and we all know that when Purdue has been really competitive over the years, it's had good offensive line play. That's saying nothing, because that's how football teams should operate if they're going to be competitive. All right, Brian.
I want to say something about quarterbacks real quick. I don't know if the Brahms think this way, but I think you got to start worrying about next year now. And I get that Austin Burton's been in your program. He knows stuff and whatnot, but I think you got to start having conversations about who we think is next between Alemo and Brady Allen, and you got to get that guy on the field in some capacity. You got to get him some second team sorts of stuff so that come spring, this isn't, you're not completely starting over here. That would be my opinion anyway. I don't know if they think that way. I know you got to do everything you can to win in the moment, stuff like that. But I just think they have to, start to prepare for what's next at quarterback, because you're not winning anything without, decent quarterback play. I don't think. And the last thing you want to do is have that really painful transition that you would have had this year had Aiden O'Connell not come back for his 6th year, and have that kind of define your season. Because playing through youth at quarterback can cost you games very easily. And if you could just get those guys a little bit ahead, I think that would be in the best interest of the program long term. Now, whether
Brian, I think they're going to bring in a portal guy too.
Yeah,
so
but he's going to be brand new too. So
I see, but presumably a guy who's played football before, been on the field in game action. I understand what you're saying. I agree to a large extent. But again, you got to win now, man. I'm sure they've given thought to 2023, but man, at some point you got to say, we got to deal with what's in front of us right now. We got to win the next game. I'll worry about 2023 when I get there. I thought about it. I'm not going to let that dictate me winning and losing games right now.
But who is better suited to win you games right now? How high is Austin Burton's ceiling relative to Brady Allen's or Michael Lemos? I guess kind of what I'm getting at. I'm trying to be polite here. I've not seen enough Austin Burton.
I agree.
Can he make the throws that Purdue's going to need to make, not just this year, but every year from here on out until the end of time?
Well, and do you think? I was going to say, Tom, do you see Alemo again? I know it's early, but Austin Burton still being in a similar package type of guy.
I feel very confident saying the staff does have package for Austin Burton down in distance situations and whatnot. We saw some of that last year. I think you can count on that. How much we see it, I don't know, but I think it's smart to utilize the guy's skill set. Maybe get you a couple key first downs this year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe only 2 or 3 times this entire year does he come in those weird down and distance situations and get you a key first down to keep a drive alive. So maybe it's just a handful of times, but I guess, Brian, if if I got Aiden O'Connell hurt, I got to start a quarterback the next week.
Mhm.
I'm starting Austin Burton.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Anyway, and
Yeah,
of course,
I think the
track record.
circumstances. I think the circumstances obviously, play into this. Like if something happens to Aiden O'Connell week 1, and you got to go a whole season. I don't think you're throwing a freshman out there in week 2. Stuff like that. But when it comes to just preparing them in practice every week,
Sure.
kind of stuff like that. When it comes to
and may get more reps in practice. You're right.
Who gets the fourth quarter in a game you're either way up or way behind, kind of thing.
In that situation, I give it to the young guy.
Yeah.
Maybe Purdue will have a couple blowouts this year.
Yeah. Well, and you got to know one thing: the Brahms and Jeff and Brian certainly are going. The focus is on those guys, and they know that they've got to be good in that position. So it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. All right, I do want to touch on, as I said, some of the biggest news of the week. And Brian, I'll start with you, just because obviously 2 big decommitments, and in today's world, nothing is really surprising. Really, probably both of them. With Ricky Collins and also the whole situation with Draymond Gibbs Lawhorn, not surprising, but still it gets your attention. Maybe it's a symptom of the way that this world is, and guys committing early. You wrote about that, but now that you've had a couple of days to think about it, what do you see?
Oh, I didn't need a couple of days to think about it because I've both of these should always have been considered real possibilities. Ricky Collins committed too soon.
Yeah.
A kid, from Baton Rouge. I know Purdue's got a good reputation for quarterbacks. I know he really liked Marty Biagi, but you're a quarterback in Baton Rouge, is one of the best players in the country, and you're going to commit. All due respect to Purdue, Purdue made a really compelling case to the kid. Obviously, the quarterback thing is what it is. But what are you doing committing? In October of your whatever year it was, junior year, sophomore year, what was it? It was
junior year,
last October. Yeah. You knew coming into this spring that, okay, this isn't over, because the sheer geography of it all was going to suggest that, hey, that there's a really prominent SEC program right across the street here. The SEC they tend to like their blue chip quarterbacks down there. And, this dovetailed with NIL and the SEC, among others, overtly paying dudes in recruiting. You knew this was going to be an issue. And it was. It was. When Oregon came after him and Florida State came after him, that was dicey. But then not only does he commit too early, but he comes out and he says all these things with certainty when I'm not really sure why he did that. But then just when you thought it was looking like this was going to be Purdue, then, out he goes. Even when he was saying all these things about Purdue, he's still visiting Florida State. He's still visiting LSU. So that whole thing just, was a strange situation, but the product of a kid just making too early a decision. Because the only constant in all of this is change. With Draymond Gibbs Lawhorn, Matt Painter went into this with his eyes wide open. He knew what he was getting into here. Kid's been at 3 high schools in 3 years. I don't know how many middle schools he went to, but I've heard stories. And I want people to understand that I'm not hearing all of this stuff from Purdue. I live in this community. I know coaches. I know college coaches. I know AAU coaches. Some of my best friends are AAU coaches. I've never had more red flags communicated to me about a Purdue commitment than I did on this one. And again, 3 high schools in 3 years. I know for a fact they've been talking to a potential fourth. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I know that it's been considered. He's played for 3 AAU programs, basically in 2 AAU seasons in high school. I know there were a couple of middle schools, stuff like that. It's one of those situations where you're always looking for something different, to the point where you're not looking for what you want, but you're trying to figure out what you want. It feels like it was this, again, I don't want to use the term instability in a disrespectful manner to anyone's family. I've been called out on that a few times here in the last couple of days. probably deservedly so. But it just was never one of those situations where the kid's been in one place for more than a couple months. And they're always looking for something different. And as soon as he committed too early too, because he didn't let anyone else recruit him. He was hurt. The only team that stayed with him really was Purdue. Comes out of the injury, takes no other visits as far as I know. Maybe talks to some other schools, whatever, but takes no other visits but Purdue. Commits too early. My strong suspicion is Matt Painter had to sit there and think long and hard about whether or not he was gonna accept that commitment at that time. He erred on the side of ability,
which he has.
Knowing he has ability, he's a good player. He's a very good player. They knew full well that this was a situation where if it wasn't a decommitment, it might be a transfer. Things like that. They were going to try to make it work because sometimes you have to err on the side of ability and then do everything you can to make it work. Surround it with stability, and that was the case with guys like AJ Hammonds. That was the case with guys like Carson Edwards to a certain extent, and that's what they were going to try to do with Draven. And I hope he lands on his feet. I hope he finds a good place, and I hope he stays there because it's hard to grow when you're constantly moving. I don't want to sound like I'm judging anybody's decisions. I don't want to sound like I'm judging anybody's family or their priorities, whatever it might be. But I'm just saying, I've covered recruiting a long time. The kids who transfer a bunch of times, there's not a whole lot of precedent there for things going smoothly at the next level.
Yeah. Tom, one other story that kind of ties into this whole collective idea, of course, the Boilermaker Alliance, the Purdue Collective was a part of an event, the Raphael Davis event up in Fort Wayne, but also announced its executive board. A lot of guys that are familiar, names that are familiar to Purdue sports, certainly one being Chris Clopton being on that. Of course, Chris being the former John Purdue club player, also starting defensive cornerback for the Rose Bowl team. It's just all this is going to be is the brave new world, I guess. And in terms of NIL and everything else that goes on with this, just in your observations, Purdue's trying to be in a good position there. They're working hard. Jeff McKean and company are working hard to get to the level that they want to get to. But this is going to be a storyline, certainly in recruiting, but in everything else, team dynamics, everything else that you look at in college football and men's college basketball, and really in all sports.
Yeah, it's not going away.
Yeah,
it still amazes me. You got one segment of the fan base that still shakes its fist at this thing like an angry old man.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
not the fan base part, but the old man yelling at cloud part. I still can't believe this is real. I still can't believe this is.
It is crazy how it's changed, though.
Yeah. Let me just say, I have no problem with the players getting paid.
I don't either. I've been advocating it for years. I just can't believe that it's a completely unregulated system.
Yeah. Forget about guardrails too. Who is it? Are the players complaining about this? Who's complaining about this? The schools, the coaches, right? The players aren't complaining about this. It's great for them. You're not going to restrict the money they make. You cannot make it not an inducement either. The cat's out of the bag. I just wish we'd get beyond the charade of NIL and just pay guys. I just wish it's just these schools are jumping through hoops with these collectives, coming up with these schemes to pay guys through these charities and whatever it is. It's just pay the guys and like normal people, make them employees. I think we're going to get there eventually, but for some reason we're going through this ruse of paying guys through these NIL collectives. Guys are still going to get paid probably under the table too. It just the same story, different verse with college sports and how it's run. And let's just get to the end.
Well,
guys, let's organize it. Let's let them unionize, collectively bargain with them, set up a salary cap, fire the players if you want to fire them, set up whatever you do with the healthcare. I don't know, but the NFL already does this. Are we looking for a model on how this operates? Why are we going through this whole collective thing? It's just, I don't know.
I think the
collectives, how they're set up. Well, I don't know. Just here we go with it. Something else is going to be corrupted, and it's going to be an uneven playing field.
Well, and I think the thing that's tough too is you got these guys like Jeff McKeon who and Purdue got day jobs, and I know they've hired an executive or an operations person as well. Boy, it's a big job to try to raise the money that you think that you need to get it done. So I do think something is going to have to
think about
change.
that too. The money going to these players isn't even coming from the schools. The schools still have to keep all their cash. Purdue's not writing checks to these players. This collective is.
Right, and that's where it's going to be. It's
what a deal for the school.
It is a hell of a deal for the schools.
What a deal for the schools. You don't have to pay your employees. Have your own money. You don't have to pay your employees.
They got to be really careful about
employees. Think about that. It's ludicrous.
Yeah,
it's insane.
They got to be really careful about bitching about this too much, because this is offloaded expense.
It is.
The schools who are doing well with it have no reason to bitch, but everybody else, the alternative is that you pay them, and that's then X number of $1 million a year. Now, I've wondered if like the Big Ten or the SEC or whoever it might be, first and foremost, might just, when they sign their new media rights deal, there's going to be so much damn money there that, hey, let's take 25 to 30% of it and let's professionalize the athletes. Let's give them all a baseline salary, and
exactly
that way, whoever does it first, forces the hand of the other and has this, for however long it exists, this enormous recruiting advantage. But for that to happen, the NCAA has to dissolve. These people have to go do their own thing. And when that's going to happen, I don't know. But it's going to come down to Power 5 football breaking off and then just deciding to do whatever the hell it wants. And if you think there's not going to be any rules, there's going to be a lot of rules, because the one constant in this world is coaches and athletic directors and administrators not trusting their peers. So there are going to be rules in place to make sure that, Alabama is making sure Auburn doesn't get to do this when Alabama is doing it anyway.
The problem is it's not going to be fast.
It's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Hell, it might. Who knows? I mean,
no sign of it though at this point.
Like, did anybody ever think that USC and UCLA would join the Big Ten now?
Yeah.
Like, you have to stop talking about anything about college football like it's impossible.
Yeah.
Because
that may be true, but
I think make anything happen. Money makes everything possible in this world we cover.
Well, we have learned that part for sure. And and you're right, when you have television contracts though, like 25 to the challenge there is, guys, is what number do you assign to it, and how do you do that? That's a challenging thing to do, because you're right, the television numbers may in some places almost double, and how do you, or not quite double, but it's going to be 80% of doubling, and that is a lot of money that's going to have to be
on the NIL thing, and then we can get off this. But how much name, image, and likeness value can any of these guys have the minute they step on campus? Zero.
Well,
what value do they have to anybody to be paid for something, especially 7 or 5 figure salary or a 5-figure deal? They got no value.
Well, they have limited.
No,
I don't
explain
know.
To me how does Zion step-toe? I'm not saying he's got an NIL. These guys have no value, but they're still making all this money when they get to these campuses.
Well, that's where this whole thing went sideways right from the get-go. Was because this was made
to get rid of this charade.
This was made for people to leverage their prominence, their star power. This was made for hometown heroes to go home and have a camp and make some money.
That's chump change, man.
Yeah, it is.
This was made for George Karlaftis to get to make a car commercial. Then, Purdue's playing in the sandbox because everybody has to now. It became this thing where paying kids to do charity work, became,
way to funnel money,
acceptable. Yeah. But also, like I said this at the very outset, all this, when Texas started paying all their offensive linemen, the very definition of name, image, and likeness, reflects the individual, not the fact that you're putting on a uniform.
There's a
Now,
million examples like that. Texas Tech's
Yeah.
doing the same thing.
right. Like paying everybody just for being on the team
It's not
is the
NIL.
antithesis of name, image, likeness.
Correct.
Because it's not your brand. It's not your identity. It's when Spencer Halstage has the same brand as Rondell Moore, then that's not about Rondell Moore's name, image, and likeness. That's just about Purdue football's name, image, and likeness, or name, image, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's where this whole thing went sideways. Now I know Purdue's hope here, at least in basketball, is to be able to come up with a baseline amount of money each year to give guys to reward them for their hard work, to be competitive in the marketplace, and to kind of sidestep some of the whole, oh, he's making more than me stuff. But that's not what, being a Purdue basketball player is not what this was, meant to pay out. Being a star, is what was supposed to get you paid.
That's it.
Being a personality was what was going to get you paid. Having a unique skill, like when Emmanuel Dewone was on Purdue's basketball team, he had paintings he could sell. He couldn't sell those because he was a student athlete. Now, hold on. He could sell those.
Yeah.
He just could not associate whatsoever with Purdue. Now, I guess that's technically true too, because these guys can't use, Purdue signage or Purdue's name or whatever in this stuff. But they had to jump through all kinds of hoops, for him to be able to sell paintings on his Instagram page. Jeremy Bloom back in the day at Colorado, was an Olympic skier. Couldn't make any money off of that. Couldn't make endorsement money for a different sport at a different level. That's the kind of stuff this was made for. Just being an offensive lineman at Texas is not what this was all about.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. But that's what it's turned into.
But
so that
there were no controls put on this right away.
Right. And that's
I had somebody, intimately aware of how things work at the NCAA tell me that we can't do anything. It's going to have to be the federal government.
Yeah.
Now you see, I saw a story the other day, Tommy Tuberville.
That's going nowhere.
I guess this is the benefit of having a football coach in Congress. He wants some sort of NIL legislation. I don't know. I mean, it could go somewhere.
It's going to have. I think it'll.
It's low hanging fruit in the South, probably, because if it's what Saban wants.
I was just listening to Ross Dellinger and those guys talk about it. Ross Dellinger reported the story, and this is the 9th effort they've tried to do something on Capitol Hill with this.
Oh, right.
First state failed, and they didn't think that this was going to have any legs either. These guys don't even have a plan.
Yeah, and that's. I think it's got to catch.
This isn't the federal government.
NIL'd out.
This isn't the federal government's problem. I mean,
yeah.
Do we want the federal government worrying about this right now?
I don't.
No, it's no one's problem but college sports, and college sports sort of made its own
leader. That's what happened. You have no leader. You got television. The
NCAA made its own bed here by fighting this for as long as they could fight this. So the NCAA is it's their problem, but it's largely a product of a creation of their own, fault. So anybody run to the federal government saying you got to do something about this, well, they don't. It was the states who started this too. Now the states are powerless, or they're not going to do, that they've already done what they're going to do. It's going to have to be a federal deal that covers the whole country. And again, nobody should want the federal government sitting here arguing about this, because it's really a very small problem in the grand scheme of things. And it's only a problem to half of those involved. This is a hell of a deal for the athletes.
Yes.
I mean, anybody who puts controls on this is now giving and taking away from the athletes, which, would not necessarily play well to a lot of people. But my whole stance on the matter has always been everybody benefits from a stable game. Everybody benefits from a strong, landscape and fundamental fairness. But this is a really tricky deal now to pull this back. I don't know if there's any doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, it is a tricky deal on a number of fronts, and something I'm with you. I kind of, none of us want to have to talk about. We'd want to talk about Purdue getting ready for Penn State.
Let's talk about COVID again. I want to talk about that.
Let's not. So,
how about
on that note, we're going to bring this show to a close. We usually. We'll get into more. There'll be more topical things, I'm sure, next week, and something new and different to discuss. But let's hope that from a Purdue perspective, that you continue to roll through practice, and we'll have that storyline to watch as Purdue is now less than 4 weeks away, right? If we're counting right, from the first game against Penn State. So I want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel. Also, the Boiler Up Bar and 811 Bistro. We appreciate them, and we will look forward to being back with you next week. And we'll argue about this and come up with no determination of exactly what direction's head, probably, but always interesting conversation. Tom and Brian, appreciate your time.
I do miss Brian's COVID reports.
Well, we'll do that, and we'll come up with some other topics we got to hit next week for sure.
No, I'm talking about like whether it was real or not back a year and a half ago.
Well,
I don't want to go
that
there.
Fun stuff.
I don't think the moon landing was real too. So.
Yeah.
Let's get back into culture wars. That was the greatest era of my career.
Yeah, there you go. Let's not. All right, have a good one, guys. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to all of you joining us next week, and we'll have some exciting topic to hit. Make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube as well. You can certainly leave positive comments about Brian and Tom, or even the simulcast itself. We appreciate that too. So have a great week, everybody, and thanks for your time.
Earth is flat.
Yeah.